So I'll move to the next slide. So this is more like Kumar, like we discussed, like there are three different stages of an any of the product, right? Mostly these are the three different stages. What we think is plays an important role. Starting with hypothesis, then we have growth stage, and then establish where like actually a product is scaling and scaled, right? So definitely there are different needs at different stages, and there are different architectures at different stage as well. Of course, we cannot plan for the scalable product from the day one and then spend a lot of time in re-architecting. Then our time to market will be slow, right? So for any startup, it's very important for they have minimal architecture at the start with the compliance needs and whatnot. But at least that should work so that they can test out the water, they can test the market out, and then slowly they can when they have more customers, they can definitely change the architecture and then move to the like with the microservices or automation on pipeline and whatnot, right? So I think Kiran, like you have been part of the different solution at different stages, right? As me does. So what are your thoughts for the like? What do you think? What are the important decisions that you take, or what how you take those decisions at different stages? Of course, I know you when in discovery call you ask the questions what exactly the expectations are, but at high level, what do you think? Which is at different stage, what kind of architecture one startup should have, one product should have?
Right, Praveen. So I'll tell about my experience that happened a few years back. So when actually I was working for a product-based startup, so it was actually the new product that we were working. So at the time they wanted to readily go within 6 months, at least as a minimum viable product into the market, and then they have to see their potential user base. And based on the revenues that they get after 6 months, so then they wanted to scale this project. So what actually I planned is if we start sitting about looking up for the extension of the architecture or scaling up the architecture, the time will not be sufficient. So what we went is as the first stage, which is the hypothesis that is mentioned in this slide. So we went with a very bare minimum layered architecture. When we say bare minimum architecture, so as everyone knows that there is a ABC of an architecture. So which we call it as a model 2 architecture. In the typical MVC areas in the olden days, where we call it as a classic model 2 architecture. So with the simple UI, which is a front, which is a tier 1 layer. Next, tier 2 is a service and backend layer, and tier 3 database layer. It's a simple model 2 architecture. So just with that architecture, so we immediately fit up the components where to be fit in UI, where to be fit in the service layer, or the middle, the tier 2 layer, and where to fit the database, the data, all the entities in the tier 3. And we started developing that, and we went within 6 months because we did not spend hardly we spent just 2 or 3 days in just preparing that model 2 architecture, the old classic architecture, and then we started. And it has helped that startup actually very well because we have taken a right decision without spending much time in that architecture, and start immediately coding and testing and pushing that to the production environment. And then they started looking about the user base, and they started seeing some revenue in their things. And then after the eighth month, actually, that means once the product has been moved to production, after 2 or 3 months, again, I got a requirement like, now why can't actually now we enhance this? The reason for enhancing this, now user base is increasing, and whatever we got with model 2 architecture is we have gone with a single server, just like it's a plain single server, single node, even it is not a distributed computing. And then now user base is growing, not only for the product in India, even at the geographical locations. Mm-hmm. So then they started seeing the growth of that. So then what actually, so I planned is where now instead of single node, why can't we go with it? We can go with a distributed node. That means the code base is still the monolithic. When we say monolithic, all the functionalities are embedded or put in one single code base. So it can be called as a var file or a jar file in terms of Java technologies, and that can be deployed in the production server, and it can be executing. So in the growth phase, how we planned is, okay, so let us not touch the code, because if we touch the code, again, it will be a very huge requirement. So let us now plan at the capacity level, at the infrastructure level. So why can't actually now we scale out the nodes instead of single node? Why can't we scale out the nodes? And we actually set up in horizontal scaling and with a proper load balancer. And initially we have, this product has been set up initially in the AWS cloud only. We use the same AWS cloud. Only thing is we have to be dependent completely on the infrastructure as service, where we use EC2 instances,
Right.
and everything we have set up manually. And so the traffic started coming, and at the 8th month or 9th month, the traffic started coming, and then the application was also well scaled. Now, the thing is, now the application is scaled well. Now that there is no performance issues, there are no scalability issues, because the application is deployed in multiple nodes in a distributed computing with a data store. Now the thing is, now the functionality started increasing actually. So the functionality started increasing, and different users, say for example, few set of user group, they wanted to access a kind of, say this is a kind of actually we can say a recruitment platform. So they wanted to access an assessment library related, and few users wanted to access the job listings related things. So different user bases wanted to or cater to multi-specific functionalities, and thereby the new functionality started keep on coming. So then what actually we planned is, so that was a monolithic. So why can't we take these new requirements as a separate modules or separate services? Because this is following a SOA model with exposed as completely web services. So why can't we actually take this service-oriented architecture and refine this to granular services? And that evolved actually for us to enter into the microservices-based architecture for this product actually. So how we planned is actually, so the monolithic architecture, existing monolithic architecture, initially we did not break that, but what we did is we keep on adding the new services as a separate microservices. And so we developed a pattern called strangler pattern. So what the strangler pattern will do is actually that will actually redirect the request to the new services or redirect the request to the existing services based on the user request or based on the user path that is accessing the functionality. So like that actually, so we have broke that monolithic to microservices based architecture, and we were able to scale well. And eventually, once we started microservices-based architecture, eventually this product where we are using infrastructure as service, we eventually moved to managed services as a platform as service with containerization approach, because every service will run in its own container environment, and that made the architecture established. And any new functionality we did not touch the existing functionality. We developed a new microservice and posted there. So, which has actually led to the scope of high extensibility and high maintainability of the architecture. So, in that way, for the same product, we have seen 3 different stages based on as the time period grows, as part of the product grows, as part of the user base grows, and as part of the functionalities grows.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. Okay, great. That's great to hear. So the quick question from my end would be, right, so there are basically, as you mentioned, the geographical location is also an important factor when you're in different stage, right? When you're in growth or scale stage, I think people from all around the world will be accessing your product. So at that time, it's very important, like high availability, like CDN, those factors plays an important role, right? So at what stage you had taken those decisions, in like growth stage or in the scale stage? Or when should any startup should think about it?
Yeah. So when we consider about this high availability, scalability, the growth stage only we started planning actually. In the growth stage actually, say for example, at different geographical locations when it started, so then we started implementing this content delivery network CDN. So that serves for the static content very fastly. And even for high availability, scalability also, the growth stage we planned. But in the established stage, once the new requirements started coming, new functionalities are being incorporated based on the business revenues, based on the business requirements, then we started splitting that monolithic to microservices in the established phase actually. But the availability, scalability are well planned from the growth stage.